The tourist flung hot tea at the royal guard, expecting him to stay frozen like a statue. But the moment the guard moved, just once, everything changed. The crowd gasped, and the smug tourist's laughter died in his throat. Here's what happened next. Now, before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the royal guards that you won't want to miss. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves across the grounds of St. James's Palace as morning mist lifted to reveal London's ancient stonework glistening with dew. Golden sunlight spilled across the historic courtyard, casting long shadows from the centuries-old architecture. The palace stood as a silent witness to Britain's long and storied history, its weathered stones having observed the passage of kings, queens, and countless world-changing events. Guard Thomas Wells stood at his post, his scarlet uniform a vibrant contrast against the palace's muted stonework. The morning light caught the polished brass buttons and gleaming medals on his chest, each one earned through dedication and sacrifice. 7 years of military service, including 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, had taught Wells the art of perfect stillness. It was a skill that had served him well both in combat zones, where movement could mean death, and now at his ceremonial post, where the slightest twitch might disappoint the hundreds of spectators who came daily to witness this living embodiment of British tradition. A growing crowd of tourists gathered in the courtyard, most maintaining a respectful distance as they snapped photos and whispered appreciatively about the guards' impeccable bearing. The quiet atmosphere, however, was shattered by a voice that seemed deliberately pitched to carry. "This is it? This is what everyone makes such a big deal about?" The American accent sliced through the morning calm like a chainsaw through silk. "Just a guy in a funny hat standing there like a statue. I've seen more impressive displays at Madame Tussauds." Ryan Cooper adjusted his expensive camera, the latest Canon hanging from a leather strap emblazoned with his name in gold lettering. His designer jeans and leather jacket marked him as someone who considered himself above the average tourist, a man accustomed to the finer things and making sure everyone knew it. "Ryan, keep it down, man," his friend Michael whispered, glancing apologetically at nearby visitors. "People are trying to appreciate the tradition and everything." "Tradition?" Ryan scoffed, his voice climbing another notch higher. "You mean taxpayer money being wasted on grown men playing dress-up? Come on, Mike, don't tell me you're buying into this British mumbo-jumbo too." A family with 2 young children edged away, the mother shooting Ryan a disapproving glance as she ushered her kids to a different viewing spot. Michael noticed and tugged at Ryan's sleeve. "Seriously, you're ruining it for other people," Michael insisted, his discomfort evident in his hunched shoulders and darting eyes. Ryan shrugged off his friend's hand. If their experience is ruined by hearing the truth, that's their problem. He raised his camera and took several rapid-fire shots of Guard Wells, the expensive lens whirring. "I mean, look at him, not even blinking. What's the point?" "You know what?" Ryan suddenly announced, a gleam appearing in his eye that Michael recognized with dread. "I bet I can make him crack. Every man has his breaking point." "Ryan, no!" Michael's protest came too late, as Ryan was already moving closer, a predatory smile spreading across his face. "This is going to be fun," Ryan declared, his eyes locked on the motionless guard, like a cat that had spotted its prey. "Let's see what it takes to wake up the wax figure." Ryan positioned himself directly in front of Guard Wells, angling his body to ensure the growing crowd could witness his performance. He struck a mocking pose, mimicking the guard's rigid stance, while making his eyes bulge comically. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the courtyard, "I present to you the world's most expensive mannequin. No batteries required, just British taxpayer pounds." His voice carried the practiced projection of someone who enjoyed being the centre of attention, regardless of the context. A few tourists chuckled nervously, but most looked away in embarrassment. Michael hung back, pretending to study his guidebook, as if it might somehow disassociate him from his friend's behaviour. "Ryan," he called weakly, "let's check out Buckingham Palace. The changing of the guard is happening in 30 minutes." Ryan ignored him completely, instead moving to stand beside Guard Wells for a selfie. "Smile for the camera, buddy," he insisted, pressing his face close to the guards while stretching his arm to capture both of them in frame. "Oh, wait, you can't smile, can you? Because you're playing soldier." The guard's eyes remained fixed forward, not a muscle twitching despite Ryan's face being inches from his own. The discipline only seemed to encourage Ryan further. "See this, folks?" He gestured to the crowd that was growing despite, or perhaps because of, his antics. "Your tax dollars hard at work, standing perfectly still, very useful in modern warfare, I'm sure. When the terrorists come, he'll stand so still they won't see him." An older man on the edges of the crowd shifted uncomfortably. The medals pinned to his tweed jacket caught the morning light. Campaign ribbons that spoke of actual service. His jaw tightened as he watched Ryan's performance unfold. Ryan, emboldened by the guard's continued stoicism, upped the ante. He marched back and forth in front of Wells, performing an exaggerated parody of a military march, his legs kicking high and arms swinging like a cartoon soldier. "Attention!" Ryan barked in a terrible British accent. "Pip, pip! God save the Queen! Tea and crumpets!" He saluted with the wrong hand, deliberately butchering the gesture to scattered, uncomfortable laughs. Michael finally approached, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Seriously, Ryan, that's enough. You're being disrespectful." "Disrespectful?" Ryan turned to his friend, voice rising. "To what? This is a tourist attraction, Mike. It's like making fun of Mickey Mouse at Disney World. It's not real." The veteran in the crowd had begun moving closer, his weathered face set in a grim expression. Several other tourists were now recording Ryan's behavior on their phones, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and the uncomfortable fascination of witnessing something inappropriate. Ryan circled the guard like a predator testing its prey. The initial rush of his performance was wearing off, replaced by frustration at the guard's unwavering discipline. What had begun as a search for laughs was transforming into something more pointed, a challenge to break the man behind the uniform. This wasn't the first time Ryan had pushed boundaries for attention. Back home in Boston, he'd developed a reputation among his colleagues for pranks that often crossed the line. The waiter he'd tripped at an upscale restaurant because the man had forgotten his appetizer. The parking attendant he'd berated until the young man was nearly in tears. The flight attendant whose looks he'd loudly critiqued during his journey to London. Each incident fed something in Ryan that he never examined too closely. A need to assert dominance, to prove his importance through others' discomfort. For Ryan, raised with wealth and never denied anything significant, respect wasn't something earned but expected. When it wasn't immediately given, he took it as a personal offence. And few things offended him more than Guard Wells's perfect indifference to his presence. In Ryan's world, being ignored was the ultimate insult. "Maybe he's actually asleep," Ryan suggested to the crowd, his voice taking on an edge. "I heard they train these guys to sleep standing up, like horses." He snapped his fingers inches from the guard's face. "Hello? Anyone home in there? Or did they just hire you for your ability to do nothing?" The elderly veteran could contain himself no longer. He stepped forward, his bearing suggesting military service despite his age. Even in civilian clothes, a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches and a regimental tie, he carried himself with the unmistakable posture of a career soldier. The silver-headed walking stick in his hand seemed more an accessory than a necessity as he moved with surprising agility through the crowd. "Young man," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had commanded men in combat, each syllable crisp with the practiced precision of an officer used to being obeyed. "That soldier is a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces. He deserves your respect." The crowd shifted subtly, sensing the change in atmosphere. Several tourists who had been uncomfortably watching Ryan's antics now seemed relieved that someone had finally intervened. A middle-aged woman nodded approvingly at the veteran, while her husband, wearing a Vietnam veteran cap, straightened slightly in unconscious recognition of a fellow serviceman. Ryan turned, sizing up the older man with a dismissive glance. "Respect for what? Standing still? I've seen scarecrows do a better job." "That uniform," the veteran continued, undeterred, "represents centuries of service and sacrifice. The men who wear it have served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and numerous other conflicts. They're combat soldiers on ceremonial duty." "Sure they are," Ryan laughed, playing to the crowd. "And I'm the Duke of Edinburgh." He gestured to the guard's immaculate uniform and ceremonial rifle. "That get-up isn't seeing any combat, old-timer. It's for the tourist photos, nothing more." The veteran's face hardened. "I served with the Grenadier Guards in the Falklands. Those medals you're mocking, they're earned through blood and sacrifice." "Yeah, well, times change," Ryan retorted, turning his back on the veteran. "In the real world, soldiers actually do something, not just stand around like furniture." He gestured to the medal prominently displayed on the guard's chest. "Probably bought that on eBay." "You want to know what a real soldier looks like?" Ryan continued, his voice growing louder as his audience attempted to disengage. "They're the ones actually doing something useful, not standing around in costumes from the 1800s pretending to be relevant." Michael made another attempt to intervene. "Ryan, we should go. You've had your fun, but this is getting out of hand." Ryan noticed the phones and played to them now, his performance becoming more exaggerated. "Welcome to England, folks, where they spend millions on human mannequins while their healthcare system collapses. Real smart prioritizing there." He paused, studying Guard Wells's impassive face. Something about that unbreakable composure seemed to infuriate Ryan, triggering a deeper, uglier impulse. His next words carried a barbed intent that went beyond mere teasing. "I bet he's not even a real soldier," Ryan announced. "Probably couldn't hack it in actual combat. That's why they stick them here, right? The ones who can't cut it in the real military." "You know what this guy needs?" Ryan's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "A wake-up call." He scanned the area, gaze settling on a small vendor cart stationed at the edge of the courtyard. "Perfect." Michael grabbed his arm. "Ryan, seriously, we should go." "In a minute." Ryan shrugged him off. "I just need some props for the grand finale." He strode toward the vendor, leaving Michael standing helplessly among the disapproving onlookers. The elderly veteran approached Michael. "Your friend is heading toward trouble," he warned quietly. "Those guards are active-duty military personnel. Interference with them can result in serious consequences." At the vendor cart, Ryan slapped down a £5 note. "One hot tea," he ordered, deliberately loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "Extra hot, please. I've got a guard who needs warming up." The vendor hesitated, glancing toward the palace grounds. "Sir, I don't think—" "Just pour the tea," Ryan cut him off. "It's not your business what I do with it." Taking the steaming cup, Ryan returned to the growing circle of onlookers, who now parted before him like a cautious sea. Several had realized his intent and began moving away, wanting no part in what was about to unfold. Others stayed, phones raised, captured by the morbid fascination of witnessing something they knew was wrong. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ryan announced, holding the cup aloft like a trophy, "I present to you the ultimate test of British stoicism. Can our friend here maintain his famous discipline when faced with—" He paused for dramatic effect. "A proper British tea time." "Ryan, don't!" Michael pleaded, making a half-hearted attempt to intervene. "That's assault. You could get arrested." "Assault?" Ryan laughed. "It's just tea, Mike. Maybe he's thirsty after standing here all day." He began circling Guard Wells again, tea extended dangerously close to the immaculate uniform. "What do you say, soldier boy? Fancy a cuppa?" The guard's eyes remained forward, but those watching closely might have noticed a slight tension in his jaw, the only visible sign of his awareness of the impending situation. He moved the tea closer, allowing the steam to rise directly into the guard's face. "Feel that? That's reality calling. Warmer than standing out here pretending to be important, isn't it?" The veteran had pushed through the crowd, moving with surprising speed for his age. "Young man, that's enough. Step away from the guard immediately." "Or what?" Ryan challenged, turning slightly toward the interruption. "He'll continue standing there doing nothing. I'm terrified." What happened next unfolded in slow motion for those watching. Ryan, in an elaborate pantomime of clumsiness, pretended to trip. His body lurched forward, arms flailing in exaggerated loss of balance. The cup of steaming tea flew from his hand with deliberate precision, its contents arcing through the crisp morning air. The hot liquid splashed across Guard Wells's scarlet tunic, darkening the bright wool to crimson and running in rivulets down the immaculate uniform. Steam rose from the fabric, suggesting a temperature high enough to scald skin. Several onlookers gasped, a woman covering her mouth in shock. For one breathless moment, absolute silence fell over the courtyard. Even Ryan seemed stunned by his own action, standing motionless as if waiting to see what would happen next. Guard Wells did not move, did not flinch, did not even blink as the hot tea soaked through his uniform to the skin beneath. His eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect, despite what must have been painful, burning sensation across his chest. The stillness broke as Ryan burst into laughter. "Oh my God," he wheezed, pointing at the spreading stain. "Look at him! He's really committed to the bit, tea running down his chest, and he's still playing statue." The crowd's mood had shifted palpably. What had been uncomfortable embarrassment was now open hostility. Several tourists began shouting at Ryan, their previous British Reserve abandoned in the face of such deliberate cruelty. Michael had backed away, shaking his head in disbelief at his friend's actions. "That is assault on a service member," the veteran declared, his voice cutting through the chaotic aftermath. "A criminal offence with serious consequences." Ryan's smirk wavered, but didn't disappear entirely. "Oh, please. It's tea, not acid. Besides, if these guys are such tough soldiers, why get upset about a little hot drink?" A chorus of angry murmurs rose from the crowd. Someone in the back shouted, "Call the police!" Several phones were pointed at Ryan now, recording his face and actions with the clear intent of documentation rather than entertainment. "You've crossed a line," the veteran continued, stepping closer to Ryan. "That uniform represents more than you could possibly understand. The men who wear it have bled for this country." "So they keep saying," Ryan retorted, though his bravado was clearly forced now. "Funny how everyone claims these toy soldiers are real military, but when it comes down to it, all they do is stand there and take it. Real impressive." "If he's such a tough guy," Ryan continued, his voice rising defensively as he sensed the crowd's hostility, "why doesn't he do something? Because he can't. Because this whole thing's a joke, and you're all in on it." The veteran's face had gone very still. "I served with men who died wearing that uniform, young man. Men who gave everything so thoughtless people like you could travel freely and disrespect the traditions you don't understand." "Well, they wasted their time then, didn't they?" Ryan shot back, his words carrying a cruelty born of cornered embarrassment. "Because all it led to was playing dress-up for tourist photos, real heroic ending there." A woman in the crowd gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. The atmosphere in the courtyard had taken on the charged quality of an approaching thunderstorm, the feeling that something significant was about to break. And then it happened. It wasn't a dramatic movement, not at first, just a slight shift in Guard Wells's eyes, moving from their fixed position to focus directly on Ryan's face. The change was so subtle that many missed it, but those watching closely felt its impact like a physical blow. For the first time since taking his post hours earlier, Guard Wells moved. The movement was precise, deliberate, military to its core. He pivoted 45 degrees with perfect precision, the heel of his boot connecting with the stone in a sharp crack that echoed across the suddenly silent courtyard. His rifle moved from shoulder to resting position in one fluid motion that spoke of thousands of hours of drill practice. Ryan took an instinctive step back, his cocky expression faltering as he found himself the focus of the guard's direct gaze. There was something unnerving about that look. Not anger, not even displeasure, but the measured assessment of a professional soldier. "Sir," Gardwell spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority of command, despite its conversational volume, "I believe we need to have a conversation about respect." The crowd had gone completely still. Even the birds seemed to have paused their morning songs. The guard's broken silence felt momentous, as if an ancient statue had suddenly begun to speak. Ryan, caught off guard by this development, attempted to recover his bravado. "Oh, look, it speaks! The toy soldier has come to life!" His laugh sounded hollow even to his own ears. "What are you going to do? Arrest me for spilling tea? This isn't Boston Harbor, pal." "Before I put on this ceremonial uniform this morning," Gardwells began, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the now silent courtyard, "I checked my kit for my deployment next month. My unit rotates between ceremonial duty and active service. Last year, I was in Helmand Province, Afghanistan." Ryan's smirk had frozen on his face, becoming more of a grimace as the guard continued. "This uniform," Wells gestured to his tea-stained tunic, "has been earned, not given. Every man who stands guard here has completed the same combat training as any other soldier in Her Majesty's armed forces. Many of us have served multiple combat tours." He took one measured step forward. "The medal you suggested I bought on eBay was awarded after an IED struck my patrol vehicle. 3 of my men were wounded. I pulled them to safety under enemy fire and held position until extraction arrived." Ryan swallowed visibly, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. The crowd had drawn closer, hanging on every word. "You see, sir," Wells continued, "when we stand here, we're not just guarding a building or upholding a tradition. We represent something that appears to be beyond your comprehension: duty, honor, and sacrifice." Wells glanced down at the dark stain spreading across his uniform. "This tea will dry. The uniform can be cleaned. But the disrespect you've shown today speaks to something far more permanent, a character flaw that should concern you deeply. The bearskin cap that you mocked," Wells indicated the tall ceremonial headgear, "dates back to the Battle of Waterloo. It's earned through service, not purchased as a costume. Every button, every braid, every element of this uniform carries historical significance that connects us to generations of soldiers who came before. Let me tell you what isn't fun, sir. Carrying a wounded comrade through hostile territory isn't fun. Standing guard over the bodies of fallen friends isn't fun. Calling in medevac while under fire isn't fun." Each statement landed like a physical blow, though Wells hadn't raised his voice at all. "The uniform you've just defaced has been worn by soldiers in every major conflict for centuries. Men have died wearing it, bled wearing it, protected the very freedoms that allow you to travel here and mock what you don't understand." Wells's eyes swept briefly across the now silent crowd before returning to Ryan. "This regiment fought at Waterloo against Napoleon. Stood their ground at the Somme in World War I, losing hundreds in a single day. They landed on the beaches of Normandy and helped liberate Europe from fascism. I have brothers in this regiment who lost limbs in Iraq and Afghanistan." He gestured to a particular medal on his chest. "This medal, I received it after our patrol was ambushed outside Kandahar. We were pinned down for 7 hours. I watched my best friend die meters from me, unable to reach him because of enemy fire. When darkness fell, I carried him 5 kilometers back to base because we don't leave our people behind. A muscle worked in Wells's jaw, the only visible sign of emotion breaking through his professional demeanour. The man who took that bullet was standing where I'm standing 3 months before his deployment. Tourists like you probably mocked him too, never knowing they were looking at a man who would give everything for Queen and country. The veteran stepped forward. I served with the regiment in '82, he added quietly. Lost 3 of my closest mates in a single day of fighting. When I see these young men on ceremonial duty, I don't see tourist attractions. I see the continuation of a proud legacy of service. Ryan looked between the 2 men, the generations of military service they represented, suddenly very real and present. I didn't know. That was evident, Wells cut him off. But ignorance isn't an excuse for deliberate disrespect. Every day we stand here maintaining discipline while people mock, provoke and harass us, not because we can't respond, but because our discipline and professionalism demand better of us. He gestured to the palace behind him. This isn't just a building or a tourist site. It represents centuries of British history, governance and tradition. When we guard it, we're not just protecting stone walls, we're standing for the continuity of the nation itself. Now, Guard Wells concluded, his voice taking on an official tone, throwing hot liquid on a serving member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces constitutes assault. 2 officers are approaching who witnessed the incident. Ryan turned to see 2 police constables making their way through the crowd, their expressions professionally neutral but purposeful. The reality of his situation finally seemed to dawn on him. "Wait, this is ridiculous," Ryan protested, his voice rising in panic. "It was just tea, a joke." "Assault isn't a joke, sir," Wells replied evenly, "nor is interfering with a guard on duty. Both carry legal consequences." The police officers reached them, nodding respectfully to Guard Wells before turning their attention to Ryan. "Sir, we need to have a word about the incident we just witnessed," the taller officer stated calmly. "Are you serious?" Ryan looked around desperately, seeking support from the crowd that had only minutes ago been his audience. He found nothing but disapproving faces. "It was just tea, come on!" As the officers began explaining the process to an increasingly distressed Ryan, Guard Wells turned to the veteran, exchanging a look of quiet understanding. Without speaking, the veteran offered a crisp salute, which Wells returned with perfect military precision. With the same disciplined movements that marked every aspect of his duty, Wells returned to his post. He resumed his guard position, rifle perfectly positioned, eyes forward. The tea stain remained visible on his tunic, a dark reminder of the morning's events, but his bearing showed no sign of the discomfort it must have caused. As Ryan was led away, still protesting, the crowd began to disperse. But something had changed in how they viewed the guard. Many approached closer than they had before, studying Wells with newfound respect. Parents explained to their children in hushed tones about the meaning of his service, the significance of his uniform, the reality behind the ceremonial role. A young girl approached cautiously, stopping at a respectful distance. "Thank you for your service," she said simply, before her mother guided her away with an approving smile. As the morning sun climbed higher over St. James's Palace, Guard Wells continued his watch. The tea had begun to dry, leaving a visible stain on the immaculate uniform. But to those who understood, it had become something else entirely. Not a mark of disrespect, but a badge of honour. A visible reminder that beneath the ceremonial exterior stood a real soldier, upholding values that had withstood far worse tests than hot tea and ignorant tourists. What would you have done if you witnessed this disrespect to a royal guard? Would you have spoken up, or remained a silent observer to history unfolding before your eyes? How does this story change how you view ceremonial guards around the world? Perhaps behind every ceremonial uniform stands a real person with real service, real sacrifice, and real stories that deserve our respect. Remember that respect costs nothing but means everything. In a world where traditions are often dismissed as outdated, perhaps we need these living reminders of values that never expire: duty, honour, and the courage to stand for something greater than ourselves. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it too. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about royal guards and the values they represent. Don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified when we upload our next video. Check out our other Royal Guard stories appearing on your screen right now, and we'll see you again tomorrow at the same time with another brand new video.